I'm going to try to answer 3 questions today. Who is Caryl Churchill? What is Cloud 9? And is this 1979 play still relevant in 2025? The simple answers are, Caryl Churchill is one of the most celebrated and influential playwrights living, now in the 7th decade of her career with a body of work spanning nearly 50 plays. Cloud 9 is one of her best known and most oft revived comedies, and for my money, this play has just as much to say to us today than it did half a century ago. Now, if you came out this afternoon because everything you've heard about the plot and structure of Cloud 9 seems confusing at best, you might find yourself even more flummoxed about an hour from now. The play is packed with ideas and contradictions and a veritable grab bag of theatrical styles and tones. Churchill herself seems to be aware of the possible tension between our comprehension of the story and our enjoyment of the story. And she gives us a bit of cheeky advice late in the play's second act when she has one character say to another, "Don't turn this into a lecture, Vicky. It's meant to be an orgy." But since we all went to the trouble of getting dressed for it, let's go ahead and start with the lecture. Let's see where that takes us. Caryl Churchill was born in London in 1938 to a political cartoonist and a secretary. Her father's work as an illustrator provided an early influence on her eventual career as a dramatist. "Cartoons are really so much like plays," Churchill says. "Just an image with somebody saying something. I grew up with his cartoons of the war, of Goebbels and Mussolini." In 1957, Churchill enrolled at Lady Margaret Hall, the women's college at Oxford, where she majored in English and soon found herself gravitating towards theater people. She saw plays, volunteered to help paint sets, and started reading Samuel Beckett, T.S. Eliot, Harold Pinter, and Bertolt Brecht, all writers that she names as integral to her development. Her first play, written on a whim for a friend, was produced at Oxford in 1958, winning an award at the Sunday Times National Union of Students Drama Festival. Her first 4 plays were initially produced and performed by student ensembles at Oxford. She received a BA in English in 1960, married a young lawyer named David Harder in 1961, and spent the next 10 years of her life at home, raising the 3 sons that came along. In her words, quote, "I didn't really feel a part of what was happening in the 60s. During that time, I felt isolated. I had small children and was having miscarriages. It was an extremely solitary time. What politicized me was being discontent with my own way of life, with being a barrister's housewife." But she did manage some dramatic writing during this period for radio. The 1960s were something of a heyday for radio plays thanks to the BBC and its embrace of classical plays alongside newer, more avant-garde offerings. Unconstrained by the limitations of theater budgets and stage space, Churchill's early work for radio showcased hallmarks of her future output: experimentation with form and structure, and interrogations of the human identity, particularly in relation to the experiences of the human body. One of these radio plays concerns the case of a schizophrenic man obsessed with the idea that God was changing him into a woman, long before this subject became the cultural flashpoint it is today. Another of her radio plays concerns identical twin brothers who despise one another, and was recorded in stereo with a single actor playing both characters who frequently speak over each other's lines. She would expand on this idea decades later with her 2002 stage play, A Number, which is written for 2 actors portraying a father and his adult son. As the play progresses, it is gradually revealed to the audience that the son we see in each scene with his father is actually a vast array of sons, different clones of the same person. The original boy died at a young age, and overwhelmed with grief, the father agreed to allow him to be cloned. One clone is happy, one clone is sad, one has since started his own family, another is convinced that he's the original boy and plans to murder the other clones. The play explores the debate surrounding nature versus nurture, as the father looks back with regret and shame on how he raised his son, and the subsequent inconsistency of morality and contentment in the various clones that now confront him. Towards the play's end, one of the more easygoing clones says to his father, "We've got 99% the same genes as any other person. We've got 90% the same as a chimpanzee. We've got 30% the same as a lettuce." Does that cheer you up at all? I love about the lettuce, it makes me feel I belong. It's a great play. So, writing drama for radio gave Churchill a creative outlet and a modest income while she cared for her young children. But the format was waning in popularity by the early 1970s. When her husband left his job to work for a legal aid group in 1972, and the two of them began engaging more directly in the social issues of the time, Churchill shifted her writing back to the stage. London's Royal Court Theatre produced her first major stage play that same year. Called Owners, it's a dark satire about the often predatory relationship between landlords and tenants, another topic that has only grown in resonance over time. The Royal Court made Churchill their resident dramatist in 1974. She was the first woman named to the position. While attending a pro-choice march in 1975, Churchill met members of a newly formed feminist theater troupe called Monstrous Regiment. Monstrous Regiment here is an ironic reference to the title of a 16th century pamphlet by John Knox called "The First Blast of the Trumpet Against the Monstrous Regiment of Women," which argued against female monarchs and proclaimed that rule by women goes against the Bible. In 1976, Churchill was commissioned by Monstrous Regiment to write a script about unequal treatment of women against the backdrop of 17th century witch hunting in England, resulting in the play Vinegar Tom. Vinegar Tom doesn't feature any witches, just an assortment of women accused of witchcraft and retaliation for spurning a man's sexual advances, expressing disinterest in being married, having an unusual mole or skin tag, or simply living next door to a farmer whose crops have failed and now needs someone to blame. What we see then is witch hunting as a means of managing social unrest during a time of scarcity, and a projection of the bad behavior of men onto the innocuous behavior of women. Despite the historical setting, the play features a contemporary rock band in modern dress that performs songs between scenes. The lyrics to one of these songs, called "If You Float," read, "If you float, you're a witch. If you scream, you're a witch. If you sink, then you're dead anyway. If you cure, you're a witch. Or impure, you're a witch. Whatever you do, you must pay. Fingers are pointed, a knock at the door. They're coming to get you. Do you know what for?" The rock songs, mixed in with the period drama of 17th century witch trials, help to illustrate the parallels to our own time. Another song asks, "Would they have hanged you then? Ask how they're stopping you now. Where have the witches gone? Who are the witches now?" Writing Vinegar Tom for Monstrous Regiment was a turning point for Churchill, in which collaboration became crucial to her process. As she puts it, you don't collaborate on writing the play, you still go away and write it yourself. What's different is that you've had a period of researching something together, not just information, but your attitudes towards it and possible ways of showing ideas on stage. This led Churchill to work next with London's joint stock theatre group, an ensemble-based company of actors, directors, and playwrights committed to the creation of experimental drama. In 1978, Churchill and joint stock set out to create a play that would soon be known as Cloud 9. They hired a cast of 7 actors, and before Churchill wrote a word, they spent a month together improvising scenes under the broad theme of sexual politics. Churchill also interviewed the cast as a group about their sexual preferences, their sexual histories, and how both were influenced by their upbringing. In other words, what they had learned about sex, gender, and power dynamics from their parents, family, and society. There was definitely no HR at this theater company. When the process began, the only thing Churchill had decided for certain about the play was that it would be set in modern day. But by the end of the workshop, she noticed an unprompted consensus among the actors that they felt sexually liberated compared to prior generations, but no less restricted by traditional conservative attitudes towards sex and gender left over from the Victorian era. In improvised scenes, Churchill observed that the actors seemed to be holding themselves back in various open-ended sexual or romantic scenarios based on what they felt was permissible, that they were free to do and say what they wished in the safety of the rehearsal room, but consistently policed themselves on behalf of an out-of-date belief system they had inherited from their parents' parents, and so on. What Churchill felt she was observing was a kind of haunting by the past on the present, what we might today call generational trauma. Trauma stored in and enacted by the body, often in direct opposition to the performer's own personal identity and desires. This is when Churchill decided to set the first act of Cloud 9 100 years in the past, as the British Empire approached its peak, this being the ostensible root of the sexual attitudes she saw her actors struggling to overcome in 1979. Cloud 9 opens in British colonial Africa, 1879. In the opening scene, we're introduced to a typical family unit: daughter, son, mother, and father. We meet a little girl named Victoria, the daughter, portrayed not by an actor, but by a toy doll, who gets thrown about from person to person and, being inanimate, of course, does not speak. Victoria, of course, as a little girl, is the role in the family afforded the least autonomy. We also meet Edward, the young boy of the family, who is played on stage by an adult woman. Directly addressing the audience, Edward introduces himself with, "What father wants I'd dearly like to be. I find it rather hard, as you can see," referring to his female body. Churchill is pointing out here the standard Western attitude towards masculinity, whereby all boys are perceived as inherently feminine by default and must be forcefully instructed to be a man instead, to grow a pair, toughen up, show a stiff upper lip, boys don't cry, you've heard them. How a man is not necessarily something you're born as, but something you must evolve into by process of eliminating in yourself all that is tender, kind, and essentially humane. Shakespeare had something to say about this. Think of Lady Macbeth as she rallies the courage to commit the act of murder when she says, "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe-top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose." Lady Macbeth prays to be stripped of her female gender and therefore her humanity, to do something monstrous or naturally male. But poor Edward, the young son in Cloud 9, has an even more difficult time playing his role than the average little boy. As we'll soon come to find out, he happens to be gay. Another member of the family we meet is Betty, the young wife and mother, played on stage by a young man, reminding us that the traditional idea of a good and submissive wife is not inherently female, but merely an act performed solely for a husband's benefit. To the audience, Betty proclaims, "I am a man's creation, as you see, and what men want is what I want to be." What we get with Betty is someone whose role doesn't fit their body, but who has grown into it like a second skin and performs her part with nearly effortless satisfaction. Betty longs for more in life, but does so with shame and doesn't seem to wonder who she really is. She counts on her husband to tell her that. Which brings us to the family patriarch, Clive, a straight white man who is played on stage by a straight white man. This comparatively untheatrical portrayal clues us into the fact that Clive is the standard by which all other characters must measure themselves against and in relation to. In 1879, when we meet him, Clive is the bearer of the white man's burden of domesticating not only the native peoples of foreign lands, but also the members of his own family. And so we see the historical impulse to colonize and plunder isn't all that different from the impulse to govern and oppress the bodies and behavior of women, children, and minorities. Now, before we get to the next character in the opening lineup, I just want to take a brief detour to talk about a book that had a significant influence on Cloud9 and that I think you should know about. The book is called Black Skin, White Masks. It was originally written in French in 1952 by Black philosopher and psychiatrist Frantz Fanon. Very broadly, Black Skin, White Masks is about being a black man in a white world. Fanon applies a historical critique to the myriad ways in which identity, particularly blackness, is constructed and maintained under colonialism, and describes widespread feelings of dependency and inadequacy experienced by black people under colonial rule. Fanon asserts that the divided self-perception of a black subject who has lost his native cultural origin and embraced the culture of the mother country produces an inferior sense of self, that the black subject will try to appropriate and imitate the culture of the colonizer, putting on the white mask of the book's title. Fanon argues that this behavior is most apparent in upwardly mobile black people who can afford to acquire status symbols within the world of the colonial order, such as an education abroad or mastery of the language of the colonizer. Quote, "The colonized is elevated above his jungle status in proportion to his adoption of the mother country's cultural standards. The Negro, enslaved by his inferiority, and the white man, enslaved by his superiority alike, each behave in accordance with a neurotic orientation." In a white society, Fanon says, such extreme psychological response originates from the unconscious training of black people from early childhood to associate blackness with wrongness and to associate whiteness with beauty and virtue, and that they can, in turn, quote, "save their race by making themselves whiter." Black Skin, White Masks did not initially attract much mainstream attention, but received wider recognition during the cultural upheavals of the 1960s and 70s, and had an enormous influence on later thinkers in black studies and critical race theory. This idea, though, of a black colonial subject associating whiteness with virtue and thinking they can save themselves by making themselves white is dramatized on stage in Cloud9 with the character of Joshua. Joshua is the family's native African manservant, a black man played on stage by a white actor. Joshua is introduced in the opening scene by Patriarch Clive, who says, "My boy's a jewel, really has the knack. You'd hardly notice that the fellow's black." Joshua then turns to the audience and says, "My skin is black, but oh, my soul is white. I hate my tribe. My master is my light. I only live for him, as you can see. What white men want is what I want to be." Yet another character, played on stage by the wrong actor. If this idea bothers you at all, the play is already doing its job. You may also be reminded of our current president and the white Christian nationalist movement that sustains him. When Clive says of Joshua and his people, quote, "You can tame a wild animal only so far. Sometimes I feel the natives are the enemy. I know that is wrong. I know I have a responsibility towards them to care for them and bring them all to be like Joshua. But there is something dangerous, implacable. This whole continent is my enemy. I am pitching my whole mind and will and reason against it to tame it, and I sometimes feel it will break over me and swallow me up." So, the mother, Betty, being played by a man, reminds us of drag. The young son, Edward, being played by an adult woman, might remind us of Mary Martin as Peter Pan. And Joshua, who is black, as played by a white actor, might remind us of a minstrel show. And that's all intentional on the part of the playwright, to get us thinking about those historical modes of performance and what compels them, both on stage and off. What's different about how Churchill employs these conceits is that you'll find no effort to deceive the audience in these portrayals. No wigs or makeup or body padding. The white actor playing the black character isn't pretending to be a black man. The white actor playing the black character is in action a white actor pretending to be a white man who we are then told is black. This is pure theater, the lie that reveals the truth. The intention is not to validate stereotypes, but undermine them, to illustrate how stereotypes are coerced out of the people they are thrust upon and the resulting dissonance we call polite society. And this is much of what Cloud9 is up to in Act 1, exploring the daily lives of an average family of the period as they either struggle or succeed to play the parts they have been compelled to perform. How heteronormative or white supremacist social constructs of gender, sexuality, race, even age are maintained and passed on from one generation to the next through practice and performance. Now, due to the heaviness of this subject matter, I may have lost the thread on what I'm about to say, but what's perhaps most extraordinary about the play is how Churchill manages to present all of these ideas in the framework of a broad comedic satire, balancing belly laughs with challenging ideas at every turn. Now, before we go any further, some of the actors from our production are going to present us with the opening scene I just detailed. We got Russell. Everybody ready back there? Take it away.
My family, though far from home, we serve the Queen wherever we may roam. I am father to the natives here, and father to my family so dear. My wife is all I dreamt a wife should be, and everything she is, she owes to me.
I live for Clive. The whole aim of my life is to be what he looks for in a wife. I am a man's creation, as you can see, and what men want is what I want to be.
My boy's a jewel, really has the knack. You'd hardly notice that the fellow's black.
My skin is black, but oh, my soul is white. I hate my tribe, my master is my light. I only live for him, as you can see. What white men want is what I want to be.
My son is young. I'm doing all I can to teach him to grow up to be a man.
What father wants ideally like to be, I find it rather hard, as you can see.
No need for speeches by the rest. My daughter, mother-in-law, and governess.
The Netherlands for England, rally to the flag. From north and south and east and west, come one and all for England.
Betty, Joshua!
Where have you been? The day's so long without you.
Long ride in the bush.
Is anything wrong?
Oh, no.
I heard drums.
Nothing serious. Beauty is a damned good mare. I need to get some new boots sent from home. These have never been quite right. I have a blister.
Oh! My poor dear foot.
Oh, it's nothing.
Oh, but it's sore.
We're not in this country to enjoy ourselves. Must have ridden 50 miles. Spoke to 3 different headmen who would have all gladly chopped off each other's head and worn them around their waists.
Clive!
Oh, don't be squeamish, Betty. Let me have my joke. And what has my little dove done today?
I read a little.
Oh, you're so delicate and sensitive.
And I played the piano. Shall I send for the children?
Yes, in a minute. I have a piece of news.
Good news.
Your visitor.
Man or woman?
Man.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Something of an explorer, bit of a poet, brave, odd chap, but brave as a lion, and a great admirer of yours.
What do you mean? Whoever can it be?
With an H and a B and those conjuring tricks for little Edward?
That sounds like Mr. Bagley.
Harry Bagley!
He certainly doesn't admire me, Clive. What a thing to say! Well, he's hardly explored anything at all. He's just been up the river. He's done nothing at all compared to what you do.
Well, you like him well enough. You don't mind him coming.
Anyone at all to break the monotony.
But you have your mother. You have Ellen.
Ellen is a governess. My mother is my mother.
Well, I hoped when she came to visit she'd be company for you.
I don't think Mother is on a visit. I think she lives with us.
I think she does.
Lord, you are so good. It's just that I miss you when you're away. We're not in this country to enjoy ourselves. If I lack society, that is my form of service.
There's a brave girl. Today has been all right. No fainting, no hysteria.
I have been very tranquil.
Oh, what a haven of peace to come home to. The calm, the cool, the beauty.
Oh, there is one thing, Clive. About Joshua.
Well, I couldn't leave you here alone with a quiet mind if it were not for Joshua.
He doesn't like me.
Joshua has been my boy for 8 years. He has saved my life. I have saved his life. He is devoted to me and mine. I have said this before.
Well, he is rude to me. He doesn't do what I say, and he said something improper.
Well,
I don't like to repeat it.
I must insist.
I was inside. I left my book on the piano, and then I went to the hammock. I asked him to fetch it.
And did he not fetch it?
Yes, he did. Eventually.
And what did he say?
Oh,
Better.
he said, "Fetch it yourself. You've got legs under that dress."
Joshua! Joshua, Madam says you spoke impolitely to her this afternoon. when you asked her to pass her book from the piano?
She has the book, sir.
But I have the book now, but when I tell
Pepe! Let me handle this. You didn't pass it at once?
No, sir, I made a joke first.
What was that?
I said my legs were tired, sir. That was funny because the book was very near. It would not make my legs tired to get it.
That's not true.
Did madam hear me wrong?
Madam heard something else.
What was that, madam?
Never mind.
Now, Joshua, this won't do. Madam doesn't like that sort of joke. Just do what Madam says. Just do what Madam says and don't answer back. You know your place, Joshua. Not say any more about it.
No, sir.
I expect an apology.
I apologize, madam.
There, my dear, it won't happen again. I'm very shocked, Joshua. Very shocked. Another drink, I think, and send for the children. And isn't that Harry riding down the hill? Wave, wave, just in time before dark. Cuts it fine, the blighter.
Can he see us?
Stand further forward. He'll see your white dress. There, he waved back.
Oh, do you think so? I wonder what he saw. Sometimes sunset is so terrifying, I can't bear to look.
It makes me proud. Elsewhere in the Empire, the sun is rising.
Shall I bring the children?
Shall Ellen bring the children?
Delightful.
Yes, Ellen, make sure they're warm. The night air is deceptive. Victoria was looking pale yesterday.
I'm warm enough, Betty. The night air is deceptive.
I'm quite warm. I'm too warm.
You're not getting a fever, I hope. Oh, she's not strong, you know, Clive. I don't know how long you'll keep her in this climate.
I look after Her Majesty's domains. I think you can trust me to look after my wife.
Victoria, my pet! Say good evening to Papa.
There's my sweet little Vicky. And what have we done today?
Oh, she wore Ellen's hat.
Did she wear Ellen's big hat like a lady? What a pretty!
And Joshua gave her a piggyback. Tell Papa, horsey with Joshy.
She's tired.
Nice Joshy played horsey. Nice big strong Joshy. Did you go for a gallop? Did you make him stop and go? Not very chatty tonight, huh?
Edward, say good evening to Papa.
Edward, my boy, did you do your lessons?
Yes, Papa.
Did you go riding?
Yes,
What's
Papa.
that you're holding?
It's Victoria's doll.
Oh!
Edward, what are you doing with it?
I'm hiding her.
Well, I should give it to Ellen quickly. You don't want Papa to see you with a doll.
No, we've had you with Victoria's doll once before.
He's minding it for Vicky. He's not playing with it.
He's not playing with the Clive, he's minding it for Vicky.
Edward, Ellen minds Victoria. Let Ellen mind the doll.
Give it to me. Don't pull her about. Vicky likes me to have her.
He's a very good brother.
Yes, it's very manly of you, Edward, to look after your little sister. We'll say no more about it. Tomorrow you'll go riding with me and Harry Bagley. Would you like that?
Is he here?
He's just arrived. There, Betty, take Victoria now. I must go welcome Harry.
Can I come, Papa?
Is he warm enough?
Am I warm enough?
Don't worry about the women, Ned. Let's go welcome Harry.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up to the cast of Cloud 9. Now, you may find yourself struggling a bit with the sheer absurdity of the storytelling here, but I would offer that's actually the point. Churchill is showing us with a kind of theatrical X-ray vision just how absurd the rules are for anyone who isn't straight, white, or male. The script calls for the prominent display of the Union Jack in Act 1, helping us make the connection between the successful governance of the roles in the family unit and the will and reach of the British Empire. But as the farce of the first act unfolds, we gradually learn that despite their best efforts to inhabit their roles correctly, everybody here is living some kind of double life under the surface of their public performance. Not only are many of these characters played by the wrong actors, they're also all in love with the wrong person. Governess Ellen is secretly a lesbian in love with Betty. Betty is secretly in love with explorer Harry Bagley, who leads Betty on in order to hide his own homosexuality and the fact that he's having sex with both servant Joshua and young son Edward, and really is in love with Clive. And Clive, of course, the supposed paragon of straight white morality, is carrying on a sexual affair with a visitor named Mrs. Saunders. Mrs. Saunders is a woman ahead of her time and rejects the limitations of the period placed on her gender, which, of course, drives Clive wild. He tells her in an early scene, "Mrs. Saunders, since you came to the house, I have had an erection 24 hours a day, except for 10 minutes after the time we had intercourse. You are causing me appalling physical suffering." This conversation leads to the play's infamously funny cunnilingus scene, which we've staged for our production as a kind of burlesque visual gag that I can't wait for you to see. All this is to say that despite his position of power, Clive cannot control these people and doesn't even consider controlling himself. As the cracks in the foundation of the family order widen into chasms over the course of Act 1, Clive forces the lesbian governess Ellen to marry homosexual explorer Harry Bagley in order to set them both straight, essentially encouraging each to lie back and think of England. The first half of the play ends with a disaster of a wedding, and we head into intermission just seconds before the inevitable collapse of Clive's regime over his family. Churchill is telegraphing the fall of the British Empire, and that's just what happens off stage between Acts 1 and 2. When the lights come up on Act 2, 100 years have passed, and we pick up the story in London, 1979. 1979 is also the year the play debuted, so functionally, we move from the Victorian era to modern day, and the aftermath of the sexual revolution of the 1960s and 70s. Despite the passage of 100 years, the characters themselves have only aged 25 years, or a single generation. And no, you're not missing anything. That math doesn't quite add up. But I will remind you of the admission by the original cast of this play that they felt in 1979 pressured to play by rules that hadn't been updated in at least a century. So, the children we met in Act 1 are now adults, and their parents are getting a divorce. The characters who return from Act 1 are the mother, Betty, the daughter, Victoria, and the son, Edward, who are now all played in Act 2 by actors of corresponding age and gender identity, thanks to the social progress achieved in the intervening years. The rest of the cast played different characters, new friends and love interests for the returning family. But now that they're supposedly free to live their lives as they choose, these characters are even more lost and confused than they were in the first act of the play. For example, Edward and his boyfriend, Jerry, can't agree on how their relationship should function. Having grown up with no example but man and woman, husband and wife, they struggle to play the parts of themselves. Jerry says to Edward, "I don't want to be married. I'm not the husband, so you can't be the wife. Why don't I do the cooking sometimes?" And Edward, the more submissive and effeminate of the two, replies, well, you can if you want to, you're just not so good at it is all. Edward is perfectly happy to play the wife, to cook and clean and wait up for his man to come home. Jerry, on the other hand, doesn't come home at all some nights, but instead stays at a bathhouse until dawn, just before passing out drunk on the floor of whichever stranger he's just had sex with. Taking gender performance to the extreme, feminine Edward is looking for connection, while masculine Jerry seems to be avoiding it at all costs. Edward is trying to make do with the most limited but familiar option, the submissive housewife he saw in his mother Betty, while Jerry is more like the explorer Harry Bagley in Act 1. All options are on the table and sex is an all-you-can-eat buffet. This less than discriminating appetite, of course, doesn't end well for Harry Bagley or his many sexual partners, which include young Edward in Act 1. Having written the play in 1979, Churchill unwittingly puts Act 2's Jerry on a collision course with the AIDS epidemic, which was just a couple of years away at the time. Now, if you'll forgive me for a small detour, this struggle to identify with the limited roles available in society is something I can personally relate to. My husband and I got married in October of 2020, at the height of COVID, and just a few weeks shy of what then looked to be the second election of Donald Trump to the US presidency. Casey and I had only been together a year, but we were afraid that if one of us ended up in the hospital with COVID, we would be kept apart, and what Trump's Supreme Court might soon do to marriage equality. So we rushed in. And because of COVID restrictions, we got married in our kitchen with only our 2 witnesses present. The ceremony was conducted by a judge over Zoom from a laptop on our kitchen table. My mom was there. Despite the rush, we're still married, and happily so. But I'm not entirely sure that we didn't also get married because we subconsciously measure the success and status of our relationship against heterosexual norms. And despite the fact that it's 2025, we still get asked by distant relatives and new acquaintances, so which one of you is the husband and which one of you is the wife? That does not offend us so much as annoy us. Maybe I'm the husband when it's time to kill a spider or open a pickle jar. Maybe I'm the wife when it comes to how long it takes me to get dressed before we go out. We just call each other husbands. We both remember how free and easy it seemed to be to hold hands with another man in public back in the 90s and early aughts. Maybe on the short walk from the car to the grocery store. But we don't feel all that comfortable holding hands in public today. And if we were black, trans women, we wouldn't even consider it. We probably wouldn't feel safe going to the grocery store, period, let alone holding hands there. I point this out only to say that whether or not the play is dated or relevant 50 years after it was written might depend on what you bring to it, on your level of remove from the identities it gives voice to. If your basic human rights are not up for debate every time there's an election, you may find the story a bit dated. If you identify anywhere on the queer spectrum, it's more likely to feel like a breath of fresh air in a room with a dwindling supply of oxygen. On the other hand, you don't have to be queer to find traditional ideas of marriage or even monogamy lacking. And you might find Cloud 9 dated because it isn't progressive enough for you in 2025. Just something to wrestle with after you see our production, maybe. Now, you might have already inferred that the second act of the play is a little more down to earth than the first. Fortunately, Act 2 elicits just as much laughter from the audience as Act 1. Adult daughter Victoria, the toy doll from the first half, now has a child of her own, and is married to a man named Martin. Victoria and Martin are struggling to co-parent, while Victoria carries on an affair with a woman named Lynn, another mother she meets at the park they both take their children to. When Edward and Jerry break up over Jerry's refusal to play husband and wife, Edward decides he's sick of men, that he'd rather be a woman, and maybe he's actually a lesbian. So Edward moves in with his sister Victoria and her lover Lynn, and while the details are vague, it's clear they're all three sharing a single bed. If this is confusing, you are following along perfectly. These characters are confused. Edward and Victoria don't necessarily find what they're looking for in bisexuality or polyamory, nor do these arrangements solve any of their problems. Quite the opposite. This is just the love that finds them while they stumble about in search of themselves, blinded by the light of the sun outside the cages they were confined to in the first act of the play. Liberation, it seems, comes with its own set of challenges. In one scene, Victoria's lover Lynn is admonishing her 5-year-old daughter Kathy not to throw stones at ducks. Lynn says to Kathy, "The man's gonna get you." Victoria replies, "What man? Do you need a man to frighten your child with?" And Lynn shoots back, "My mother said it. I changed who I sleep with. I can't change everything." In the first act of the play, we see the children get smacked in the face several times as a form of discipline. In the second act, they're bent over in public and viciously spanked. What we call progress sometimes turns out to be little more than a new coat of paint on the same old dilapidated structure. I should point out that only one character is played by the wrong actor in Act 2. Lynn's 5-year-old daughter, Kathy. Kathy is a girl who wants to wear frilly dresses and shoot toy guns. She throws a temper tantrum when her mother wears pants in front of her friends, but comes in crying with a bloody nose after a group of boys reject her on the playground, saying, "They said I can't play. They said I'm a girl." Rejecting the standard expectations of binary gender, Kathy is the most modern character in the play by far. She's also something of a terror on the playground, which she militantly patrols with her plastic rifle. Kathy is portrayed in our production by the same actor who plays Clive in Act 1. If you guessed Matt Wally, you are correct. Now look, there are different ways to redistribute the roles in the second act. And by Caryl Churchill's own admission, they all come with their own interesting resonance. She leaves it up to us. Some productions of the play recast Clive in the second act as his son, Edward, which indicates a softening or expansion of masculinity over time. But when Clive becomes Kathy, we're reminded of just how childish the patriarchy has become over time as its power and influence continue to collapse in on itself. And this is part of the fun of the second act, the way Cloud 9 employs our own memories of Act 1 as we watch Act 2. We remember, of course, what a steaming, hypermasculine blowhard Matt Wally was as Clive in the first half, and automatically hold that up against his new role as Kathy in the second. Hunter Nat, who plays the delicate and feminine young mother Betty in Act 1, becomes the dark and brooding gay street hustler Jerry in Act 2. Churchill invites us to think not only about historical modes of performance, but how they shift and evolve over time in the bodies of those who perform them. The most widely relatable of characters from Act 1, now unmoored in Act 2, is the mother of the family, Betty. A woman of a certain age, now divorced and living alone for the first time in her life, Betty finds herself adrift in the void left by her ex-husband. She says to Lynn, "I find when I'm making tea, I put out 2 cups. It's strange not having a man in the house. You don't know who to do things for. And the money, I feel like a child with the money. Clive always paid everything." Seemingly inspired by the sexual adventurism of her adult children, Betty starts to grow. In one of the play's final moments, she gives a rousing monologue to the audience about how her mother caught her masturbating as a young child, and how the physical violence and moral shaming she received afterward prevented her from touching herself again for the rest of her life. She says, "I used to think Clive was the one who liked sex. But then I found I missed it. I thought if Clive wasn't looking at me, there wasn't a person there. And then one night in bed in my flat, I was so frightened I started touching myself. I thought my hand might go through into space." Later in the monologue, she says, "I thought I'd betrayed Clive. My mother would kill me. But I felt triumphant because I was a separate person from them. And I cried because I didn't want to be. But I don't cry about it anymore. Sometimes I do it 3 times in one night, and it really is great fun." This monologue in full is worth the price of admission alone. Truly. I told you that Caryl Churchill interviewed the actors in the process of workshopping Cloud 9. She also interviewed the staff of the theater where these workshops were held. One of these staff members was an older woman who worked at the snack bar. Recently divorced, this woman told Churchill about her unhappy first marriage and that she'd recently met someone new and had her very first orgasm at the age of 59. In front of the cast, this woman said, and I quote, "We may not do it as often as you young people, but when we have our orgasms, we're on cloud 9. And that, of course, is where the play found its title. For all its grasping and confusion, Cloud 9 is ultimately about making peace with the past in pursuit of a more blissful present and a reminder that it's never too late to do so. Now, in case I lost you at any point in the last hour, I'm going to try to recap what's going on here as best I can. Act 1 of Cloud 9 is about the colonization of sex and gender roles during the Victorian era. During intermission, the fall of the British Empire and the birth of the Third World. Act 2 is about the impact of colonialism on sex and gender roles in the modern day, where we see everyone who's not a straight white man become their own third world, liberated but traumatized, struggling to move forward without reenacting the past. In some cases, unwittingly carrying on the work of their oppressor in the uncertainty of their absence, like a dancer performing choreography they thought they'd forgotten by muscle memory alone. The human brain, of course, is hardwired to seek comfort in the habitual, even when it entails self-harm. We prefer a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. In Cloud 9, liberation isn't about the freedom to do whatever we want, but the courage to make choices that haven't already been made on our behalf. As world-famous drag queen RuPaul says, we're all born naked, and the rest is drag. So who did you dress up as today? Just who do you act like when you're at work, or among friends, or in bed with your partner? What costumes or props do you use to play yourself? Do any of these roles really suit you? Or do you sometimes find yourself dancing to a song stuck on repeat? That's my talk. Thank you for your time today.